Good evening. This is the Wednesday, March 19th meeting of the Finance Committee. It's just about 7 o'clock. Our agenda tonight, we've got our call to order, and I've got to ask if, in accordance with open meeting law, is anyone recording out there in the audience? Okay, I'll check that box. Thank you very much. We've already made some adjustments to our agenda tonight, even for my committee here. We're going to open with Fire Chief Coleman coming up just to make a statement to us. Then we're going to go into reviewing fiscal 15 budgets in this order. The police department, they also have a transfer, we'll take care of it. At the same time, the school department, then general services, solid waste. We were actually going to look at debt and interest tonight, and the CFO has asked to put that on hold just based on some recent changes that have come along that he'll explain also. And at that point, we'll adjourn. Actually, a pretty full meeting tonight. So I'd like Chief Coleman, if you can come on up first.
Oh, you want me?
That'd be great. Thank you.
That's from Julie.
Okay. Chief, before you begin, one addition to our additions and subtractions and additions is we're going to have a little bit of discussion on the change in bond rating. This is after the chief's done. My apologies on that. I don't take good notes. So, Chief, the microphone's yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here tonight just to clear up a little confusion on some statements that were made when I was here 2 weeks ago that I think a better choice in wording on my part could have eliminated some of that confusion. When I was here 2 weeks ago, we had a discussion regarding building-related capital items within the fire department, and I indicated that night that there was no mechanism to deal with those issues. And that's not what I meant, and that is not an accurate statement. What I meant was that each year, every department tries to live within a budget, within the CIP, and I never intended to lead the Finance Committee to believe that any of my building-related CIP had been denied. The fact is that there is a mechanism in place to make those requests. I just have not made them. Since I've been chief, I have not submitted any building-related capital improvements, and, excuse me one second, and that is because I have no major CIP items on the horizon within the next 5 years that actually meet the CIP criteria. Another part that I think led to a little confusion that night was I was actually a little surprised when I was here to learn that you had the list in front of you of repair items for Station 2. I actually found myself here second-guessing, did I give you that list? That was actually handed to you in error. It was never meant for the Finance Committee to see. That was a document that was meant for internal use only for the town manager and the CFO as a heads up during my budget discussions in January to say these are some items that are on my radar that I will be before Finance in the spring to try to address some of those issues. If you look at that particular letter, it's not dated. It doesn't even have my name on it. So again, it was never meant for public use. So I think it added to a little of confusion, and I'm not sure if the Finance Committee actually thought that that was a list of CIP items that I had been denied in my capital plan, but that again is not the case. The comment was made at the last meeting that I need to advocate for the department and our needs. I absolutely advocate for our needs, and I think town administration will tell you that. Again, I want to reassure the Finance Committee that repairs to our buildings are not being overlooked, and just because I have not put any items forward does not mean that nothing is being done. Since I've been the chief, we've completed 15 building-related projects and upgrades. Some of those projects were completed by the DPW. Some of those projects were completed by outside vendors. But most of the projects were completed by fire department staff. I have some very talented tradesmen in the building that handles a lot of the work. So again, all of these projects were completed within the operating budget. The last point that I'd like to make is related to the roof leak at Station 2. 2 weeks ago, I said that there was a hole in the roof, and that is actually not the case. What I should have said is there was a hole in the ceiling from the roof leaking. So it was a poor choice of words on my part. And I think I left the Finance Committee with the impression that there was this gaping hole in the roof, and that is not the case. I just want to, assure the Finance Committee that there was a move a couple of weeks ago to try to appropriate some funding in order to repair that because we didn't want it pushed off. And although I greatly appreciate it, the reality is that a funding source had already been identified back in January, and that was sort of the point of that internal letter to the town manager and the CFO. It was never intended to be pushed off. It had not been ignored, and again, like I had told town administration in early January, that I'd be coming before the Finance Committee sometime within now the next few weeks, looking for a transfer to make that repair, and those repairs, it had always been the intent to be done in April. So I apologize to the Finance Committee if there was any confusion. Again, I want to reassure the Finance Committee that nothing is being ignored. Long-term capital needs are on the radar, and they will be submitted within my plan once they will be part of a 5-year plan. Both town administration and the Finance Committee have been extremely supportive and responsive to the needs of the Fire Rescue Department. I am extremely appreciative of that, and I'm sorry for any confusion. Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Are there any questions? Jim, go ahead.
Chief, before you hack off, I guess my only concern with the leaky roof is that can certainly lead to other issues, mold, whatever. Is there a plan? It seems like that's something that should be at least looked at soon.
And again, I think that there was some confusion that it had never been looked at, and that's not the case. This is something that we've been chasing for a while. As a matter of fact, after the meeting, after the 2 weeks ago when I was here, we went up, we inspected the roof again. There was still a little bit of snow, but we actually, with the DPW, we put 1,500 gallons of water on the roof. We pumped 1,500 gallons of water to try to find the leak. It didn't leak.
That figures.
30 hours later, the first drips started coming through. So this is something we've been chasing. We've known it's there, but again, it's hard to identify something that you can't find.
Okay.
The end result is I've received the quotes for the roof. I just need to select a vendor, but again, weather is everything. They can't put the roof on when it's too cold, so it was always the plan that it was going to be done in April. I agree with you. Again, it's just, the timing is poor. There's not much we can do with that in the winter. The good news is we have inspected the upper part, and there is no damage. Everything seems to be structurally sound. There is no mold. There is no rot. So that's the good news. So the roof repair should address this issue.
You found funding then? You have?
Yes, I knew where the funding was coming from in January, and that's why I think there was a little confusion. Like I said, I appreciate the efforts a couple weeks ago to try to find it. I wasn't clear.
Okay.
In January, I knew where I was going to get the money internally.
Obviously, we don't want a $2,000 repair to turn out to be a $20,000 because of rot and
Yeah,
whatever else.
yeah, and the good news is the DPW has inspected that, and that's not the case.
Well, that's good. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Chief, thanks for your time. Appreciate you coming up. Next on the agenda would be, I guess I'll open to town administration to talk about the bond rating. And some recent good news.
Through the chair, would you mind, can I just do one quick follow-up?
Absolutely.
If that's
Sure,
okay?
absolutely.
'Cause I know at the last Finance Committee meeting, there was a lot of discussion that, obviously, and all of you are absolutely correct, we need to be maintaining our properties. And I too want to apologize that I have not vocalized or verbalized the work that we have been doing for the last couple of years. It is actually one of the goals that the Board of Selectmen sets for me every year. It's a standard goal that town facilities are maintained. So I'm constantly watching it and looking to make sure that the department heads are feeding us the information they need for those buildings. And I take responsibility for not giving that information out to the public. We do it, and we go on to the next project, and maybe we should be letting people know more about what we're doing. So that's what I wanted to do tonight, just to let you know, we absolutely, it is a goal. It is, even if it wasn't a goal, it would be a goal of ours as a town administration. We have to maintain our facilities. And just to let the Finance Committee know, a couple of years ago, I believe in February of 2012, one of the goals that the board had given me, in addition to the standardized goals, was to come up with a capital improvement plan review procedure. And we have that here for you. I want to make sure that you have that. This is actually a long-term plan where we work with the department heads to inventory what assets they have, inventory what they need in their buildings, and develop a plan to make sure that we get those funded. And that has already been done. It was submitted to the board 2 years ago. So, again, I apologize. I should have brought it to the committee at some point, but once I heard that the committee was concerned, I agree with you. I would be concerned, too, if we weren't maintaining them. So I just wanted you to, first of all, see the plan that we have in place. This was put together by the CFO a couple of years ago, worked hard to put this together. He has been implementing this, started probably in FY13, more in this year. We knew it was a long-term plan because it's a shift in how we focus our CIP efforts. And he's done a great job on that. I also wanted to let you know that one of the reasons that we put together this entire facility management department in DPW was to maintain our properties. And our intent was twofold. Number one, it was to stop the need for always having to go out to bid and always having to subcontract work. So we do it now in-house. It saves a lot of money by doing that. The second need is, wherever we possibly can, we want to be funding our facility improvements without borrowing for it. We don't want to be incurring debt service on projects that we don't have to. So therefore, that was one of the financial policies that we proposed, that the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen adopted, was to set money aside every year out of tax levy for capital. And the other part of what we've been doing is to try to identify funds through the plan that I just gave you by looking at and cleaning up every year articles and unexpended balances and putting them toward these projects. So just to let you know, just this year alone, and again, this was done as part of my report to the Board of Selectmen, which it hasn't been public yet, but I did submit it to them. It'll be public probably in a couple of weeks. This is just a list of the facility projects that were completed in 2014 alone, and by DPW. And these are some of the major projects. There have been countless smaller projects that I can't even begin to start. Whenever something happens in the building, they come right away. But the total project cost that we estimate we would have had to spend, either off of the CIP or through another source, would have been about $390,000. And that's just in 1 year. And then lastly, I just, again, want to make sure that this committee is comfortable that we are maintaining our facilities. This is just a list of the improvements that we've made in the last 3 years to our other town facilities. Exterior of Town Hall, interior of Town Hall, Senior Center, Library, Police, and Parks, and the DPW list you have separately. I know the chief alluded to it, and if you're interested in having it, I brought it with me as well. Chief, if you don't mind, I'll just share. This is a list of all the projects that have been done at the fire stations as well, at both stations. And again, this is through DPW, a couple of subcontracted projects that couldn't be done by DPW, primarily before they were even in existence for facility management, but primarily through the talented work of our firefighters and through the work of the department. So I do want to assure the Finance Committee and the residents of this community that we are absolutely maintaining our properties. We'll continue to do that. We have the policies in place to do it. We've implemented those policies, and we are constantly looking for the funds to get that done. And hopefully, we will have less reliance on borrowing, which does lead into the next discussion on bond rating. But thank you for the opportunity. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was well aware of what we're doing. And from now on, you know, I probably should update this list and make it available, because it's been something that we maintain, but it's not necessarily, people don't know what we're doing. We should probably show that more.
Yeah, absolutely, and I would think, just as a mechanism, how about when we issue the CIP or the budget books, Ed, if we could have an update of what was done in the last year anyways, because it'd be a nice reference for us anyways.
Yeah, absolutely, happy to do that.
Which is fine. Yeah, it's good information to have. Well, Julie, thanks for the update.
Well, thanks for entertaining me, coming and speaking to you for a couple of minutes. I know you have a busy agenda. And what you're receiving now is our great news. I'm going to turn to Ed to explain it, but I'm sure you saw we sent a notice out to the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the media picked up on it as well through a release that we did on our bond rating. And it's excellent news. We've worked, all of us, the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, town meeting members, town administration, everyone has worked so hard over the last couple of years to get to this point. So we're thrilled that we were finally recognized for that work. So go ahead, Ed.
Thank you, Julie, and this certainly is great news to report. As you are well aware, we've been discussing this not only with the Finance Committee, but the Board of Selectmen as well. We just received bids on $11,040,000 for a refunding issue on a current debt that we're paying for Auburn High School. There is a callable provision on those bonds. There is like a 6-month window at the halfway mark, roughly the 10-year period. We exercise that option, and we are significantly saving the taxpayers of this community a lot of money as a result of the bids we received today. And the bids are low because we went for a rating before Moody's and a rating before S&P. The good news is S&P rated us a AA+, which is one rating shy of the highest rating a community can receive. And I did hand out to you the rating for Moody's and for Standard & Poor's. As you can see, Moody's, we maintained a strong AA3, hoping to get a higher rating. They recently went through some changes in the way they evaluate a community's financial creditworthiness, and that comparison is done on a national level. It got a little more, I think the criteria is a little more tougher than it was before. So we maintained our rating. There was no risk of a reduction in the rating. But as you can see, in comparison to Moody's, we're 2 steps above on a comparison basis where we currently are with Moody's. As a result of that, the bids that came in today, we were expecting, if we maintained a AA3 rating, the expectation was we would get a rate on our bond issue, $11,040,000, about a 2.51 true interest cost rate. We received a rate of 1.96, so it's roughly 55 basis points, a little over half of 1%. We will calculate the savings on that. This information just came in today. Based upon the way the debt is structured, we're going to come in with an estimated cost savings over the remaining balance of that time. And we also went out for $10 million short-term notes, bands, to fund and finance the construction of the new middle school. So at some point, I know in September, we're going to bond roughly $13 million at a minimum for the middle school, and that's going to translate into big savings, given our new rating under S&P at a AA+. We will get both reports to you for your review. A lot of positive news on S&P's part, as well as Moody's. Still highlights a lot of highlights on our financial strengths and other criteria used in rating Auburn. But going forward, every time we go to market now, we're going to get a better rate, and that's going to save the taxpayers of this community a lot of money. I can tell you on the $11,040,000, the budgetary savings to Auburn is roughly $2.5 million as a result of refunding those bonds. On a budgetary, it's about $1.5 million. So although we're raising that outside of the levy limit, over the life of the bonds, we're saving 1.5. The taxpayer's true cost is 2.5 million. So that's pretty significant. Lower rate, because we refinanced at a lower rate, but we also capitalized on the fact that we got a higher bond rating, and that's driving our rate down.
Excellent. Questions, comments, Kim?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome job. Eddie, when did we get the AA3 rating? Had that for a lot of years, I thought that was like maybe 2 years ago,
we had a
3 years ago?
we had a downgrade right after we borrowed money for the high school. And then Moody's went through a restructuring of their rating. And so although it wasn't a formal upgrade, they reclassified us at a AA3. It was probably about 3 years ago.
So before that, we were like an A1, maybe?
We would probably consider a rating below their current AA3. And if you look at that, it's roughly an A1.
That's awesome. I mean, that is tremendous accomplishment for the financial administration of the town, and you,
We plan on having a follow-up discussion with our rating analysts from both Moody's and from Standard & Poor's, but the feedback that we got from our financial analysts, who quite honestly, they've done a super job. Lisa Dickinson and Brianne, I can't say enough about the hard work that they put into at least representing Auburn. But the feedback that we're getting is that Standard & Poor's indicated if we stay the course and we improve and tweak a few of our management financial policies, there's no reason, the outlook for the next 2 years is that the AAA rating, the highest rating, is achievable for the town of Auburn. So a lot of positive movement on our reserves. They want to see us continue that. OPEB was a big piece of that. Very impressed with that. They actually asked if they could use Auburn's financial model for other communities to follow. They were so impressed. So good news to the entire financial team. Everyone worked very hard over the last 3 to 4 years to get to this point. Finally paid off. We were a little frustrated. We're glad now that we got the dual rating. I think we can now recognize the benefit of that long-term plan, and we would like to continue that and maintain at least where we are right now, if not try to get to the best rating. See.
just want to follow up. I know you said the savings is 1.5 million on that, was it $11 million borrowing? Is that over the life of the bond?
That's over the remaining, yes, that's over the remaining term of the bond. We had roughly 1 odd million in reserve, that's why the total savings was 2.5. When you apply that reserve
Towards the
immediately
total.
towards that pay down, then the 1.5 savings is the budgetary savings we'll realize over the remaining balance of those bonds, which
So
is
over how
roughly
many?
10 years.
10 years? So if it was equal every year, it would be like $150,000 a year on that one borrow.
Yes.
And just to be clear on that, that particular borrowing is outside of our operating budget,
Right.
correct?
So
Because it
it's-
was part of the
Right.
debt exclusion.
So it's a savings to the taxpayers because we're only raising the amount required to pay for our debt and interest on an annual basis. So there's no savings that we can bring back to you and appropriate for something else because we're only raising the amount required to pay off the debt and interest on the bond.
Okay, no, that's great news.
Excellent.
That reserve, then, we do not need to keep in place? Or is that
Well,
just a
every year,
mechanism?
we actually had to set and get approved by DOR, which is called the DE1. It's a debt exclusion -1, that's what they call it. And over the remaining balance of the bonds, they amortize that 1.1. So every year, we were applying roughly $100,000 to reduce our debt burden. It's a requirement at DOR. And we realized that by, A, there was a balance in the bond proceeds when the school was completed. That portion went into the reserve. And number two, when we went out and borrowed money, we forced a premium, so that money had to be reserved as well.
Excellent. And we'll be going out again in September?
We will be
If I heard
going out in
correctly.
September. We plan on bonding our capital needs for 14 and 15. Currently, we went out for a bond for our 14 capital, roughly 1.5 million. As you can see in the capital plan, we've planned on funding roughly 1.4 million of capital through bond proceeds. So 3 million of capital will be bonded in September, in addition to 3.6 million that we currently have to fund our middle school for the feasibility and for the architectural and design phase, and the 10 million that we currently are borrowing today that will get us to September. So we'll have roughly 13.6 million for middle school, 3 million for town capital, so we'll be bonding at a minimum 16 million and change.
And those additional bondings and bannings are part of the reason why we're pulling back, looking at debt and interest. Is that going to get changed for the fiscal 15 budget based on projection? Or is that a 16?
The
Or is that
plan
a
is to
16
reduce
result?
our debt ratio, and quite honestly, S&P would like to see an amended portion of our management financial policies to kind of tighten up on that a little bit. Although it's very manageable, and we have full control over that, and they recognize that we're throwing tax levy every year at our capital, which is a positive. They want to see us set a benchmark for that. So we plan on amending that, bringing that back before you with some other amendments to those policies as well, primarily investment-related, some investment policies as it applies to our OPEB and our, just the way we invest in general. But if you look at the capital plan over the next 5 years, you're going to see that the need is tapering off.
Right.
So our need on bond proceeds to fund our capital is being reduced over that period of time. Right, and as part of the plan that was developed, that comprehensive plan that Julie passed out to you, part of that plan was to recommend that our capital needs start with a minimum of 10,000 instead of 5, because we like to handle some of our smaller capital needs through tax levy, so we don't have to borrow money for items that are borderline eligible under the CIP plan. So that's going to take some of the burden off of our requirement to go out and borrow money to meet those smaller needs as well.
Good. I'm pretty sure your finance committee is in complete agreement on something like that. That's great news. And excellent job, both you guys and Board of Selectmen also, keeping these guys' feet to the fire. So, excellent.
Well, I'd like to give credit to both the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee for supporting the strategy, the methodologies used, because it's applied in the annual budget every year. I mean, these policies, once adopted, are built into at least our recommendations, and it's something you supported, the Board of Selectmen have supported, and very thankful for that, as well as the school department and the school committee and town meeting as well. Because when they vote on the budget, in essence, they're supporting the policies as well. So it was a combined joint effort. Everyone deserves a lot of credit, and we were happy to report this to you tonight.
Excellent. Thank you. Good timing on that. Any other questions or comments from the committee? All right. Let's move on then with the budgets. Chief and Lieutenant, good to see you both.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, how are you?
Doing good, thanks. Doing very good. Chief, we've been asking all the department heads if they could just give us a brief overview of what they're looking for in 2015, highlights, staff ads, that kind of thing. So whatever color you can add to that, and then we'll open up for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and be brief. I know you have a full plate this evening on on your agenda.
Every department's important, Chief.
Essentially, what we're looking at is about a 7.70% increase, and that is pretty much made up of contractual obligations with respect to the new contract that was recently negotiated with the Patrolmen's Union, the Supervisors Union, and the Dispatchers Union. And it also addresses the difference in pay between a sergeant and a patrolman because we had added a sergeant that wasn't originally budgeted last year. The only other thing that really has changed with respect to the budget is a $10,000 reduction in the overtime line item. What we did is, when we did contract negotiations, the sergeants went on a new schedule, and as a result of negotiating that schedule with them, where we may have to revisit it in the fall, we'll see how it goes, but essentially what it does is when a vacancy is created amongst the supervisory ranks, it's now filled with 6 hours of overtime as opposed to 8. So, in keeping with that, we're hoping to see a reduction in overtime. Again, there are a lot of variables that are in play. It depends who's out long-term sick, who's out injured on duty, what reimbursements there are as a result of that, et cetera. But essentially, that's really all that we have regarding changes within the structure of the budget itself.
Okay, Chief, the CFO, I think, wants to add some
Sure.
color to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to, once again, emphasize the fact that it's really not a 7.7% increase over prior fiscal year, because all of the contractual obligations for the current fiscal year, 2014, were appropriated or set aside in the reserve account. And once those negotiations were settled, then a number of transfers were brought before this committee to transfer into the budget. So the appropriation does not reflect those transfers in. And that holds true for all departments. And I just want the Finance Committee to keep that in mind, because it looks like a whopping increase when in fact it probably nets out to someplace a little over 3%.
3% is...
I mean, roughly half.
In reality, right?
Okay. No, that's good to know. I was looking at them like, this doesn't make sense to me. And, I know contracts were just negotiated, that kind of thing, and there was some give and take. This doesn't reflect if within the negotiations, some of the give and take involved insurance changes also, and that's one thing that doesn't come up in department budgets. So even that 3% may really, if we included the insurance changes, it would have knocked that down maybe to a certain extent also, correct?
Yes, as a result of, I think, some of the things that were negotiated at the table, it's going to limit our exposure by way of IOD, workers' comp for other departments, where certain accruals are not applied after being out for a period of time. Town administration now has, after a period of time, authorization to do independent medical exams to get a second opinion. That would allow for an individual, hopefully, to come back to work a lot sooner than, because now we're getting our own set of eyes looking at these cases. So a lot of case management. We try to limit our exposure on that side, so ultimately it does translate into savings within, or outside of this budget.
Right, but certainly within the police and all the departments from the way you described to us. Okay, that's fine. And thanks for the brief overview, Chief. I'm going to open this up to questions, unless you have anything else to add at
No,
this point.
that's pretty much it.
Great, thank you.
In a nutshell, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? Kim?
Chief, how many vacant funded positions do you have currently?
Currently one.
Just in the officials rank?
Well, one sergeant that retired, his position is funded and currently unfilled.
No patrolman positions?
Not at this time, but once someone got promoted to sergeant, the patrolman's position would be filled as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you tell me, I see a doubling of the command stipend, what is that?
The command stipend, that's a contractual stipend that the command staff gets that the body of patrolmen don't get. It was something that they negotiated in probably about I want to say maybe 6 years ago.
Does everyone get it, or all the officials?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's just a contractual obligation?
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What's that? Ed, Jim, anything? Yeah?
Question, I see there's a new line item for professional development. Who is that for?
We had that in there some number of years ago, and the basis for that is to try and attract training to come into the police station, into our community room, and basically, they like us to do things to set things up, whether it's coffee or pastry in the morning or whatever it is, but essentially, what that does is that's going to allow us to purchase something for maybe, $50 or $60, but what happens is when we attract these companies to come here, they give us free seating. So some of the classes, the seats are $250 to $500. So for the small amount of money that we're going to send to get the free seats, it's well worth it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All set, Ian?
Yes, thanks.
I know, Chief, you basically had hit on the points I had on your budget, so thank you for being succinct and to the point on these things. I don't have any other questions on the operating budget, so what I'd like to do is take a vote on that. We'll also need, if there are any questions on the CIP, and then we'll have a transfer for the chief, so we'll take care of it in that order. And once again, Chief, as we're voting on this, as new information arises over the next several weeks, if there's any reason or need for changes going on, we'll work through town administration, obviously, and if you feel the need to come back up here, we won't reopen and vote on it again if that's the case, without making sure you're aware of it and give you the chance to come up here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As usual.
You folks as a body, as well as the town administration, have always been very, very supportive and open to making amendments if and when they're ever necessary. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a town manager requested budget of, if I'm reading right, $3,996,420. That's compared to a fiscal 14 appropriation that was before contractual adjustments of $3,710,568. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Great, thank you very much. Okay. Let's go to the CIP. Chief, any quick highlights on that? I know we're continually, I'll say, rolling in and rolling out cruisers and transportation vehicles.
You're relatively straightforward, standard run-of-the-mill,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, nothing.
I did notice, and as I'm kind of looking up the page here, you've got some money budgeted for roof in a couple of years. Yeah, shingle the roof in 17. That plan is still in place?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And I'm hoping, at least from town administration, I know you've had some challenges regarding the physical plant over there, that under some other evening, we'll hopefully be reopening that can of whatever you want to call it, and addressing it anyways. I just think in the spirit of what the town manager was saying, we are not going to let our facilities, just basically crumble into the ground, whether that be a swamp or reclaimed land or whatever it is. Any questions on the CIP, Kim?
To the CFO, Eddie, can you explain the cruiser lease purchase and the purchase B? Is that like we're purchasing some and paying
Yes.
lease?
The one labeled, second one down, lease purchase, that's a current lease obligation that we have.
Okay,
So that's why it's all, anything you see in,
yellow,
within a box is a current lease that exists.
okay,
Or it may be a proposed lease that we're looking at. For the first time, we are proposing that all of our police vehicles going forward, will be purchased through tax levy. And that's a big nut, so we won't have to pay interest cost on cruises that historically we went out for a period of 2 to 3 years. All depending on the rates, all depending on financing arrangements. But this recommendation will now allow us to purchase our police vehicles upfront with tax levy funds.
And how many vehicles will be purchased? Do we routinely purchase each? Do you have a
3.
3? How many vehicles do we have?
Marked frontline vehicles, right now, we have 12.
So you replace them like every 4 years? I wish the city would do that.
You all set, Kim?
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, Jim? And
One comment, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
I think this, once again, you're seeing the benefit of that earmark of tax levy of 1/10 of 2.5 on an annual basis. So not only, and I think we identified this last week, or the week before, not only are we funding our police cruisers now, we are funding our town road improvement through tax levy, not through borrowed funds.
Right.
So we're going to continue to apply that same methodology within our CIP plan over a period of time, ultimately leading to a time when we won't need bond proceeds to fund our CIP needs. It's going to take some time, so,
Question, Chief, specific actually to the cruisers. I know you've been transitioning over to the Ford Explorer. Obviously, the Interceptors have been
Discontinued.
discontinued, good word on that. These numbers, are they reflecting reasonable estimates on the Ford Explorer and conversion kits and that kind of thing?
Yes, they are.
Okay. I've got a customer where I work who is in the business of the conversion business for the police, and a lot of towns have had some issues because they've had to go briefly to aftermarket because of that transition, the extra detailing you need on that, and equipment wasn't quite ready for the Explorers when they rolled into that.
We do the best we can to take the equipment from the older vehicles and transfer it into the newer ones,
Okay,
which helps cut down on the cost.
great. Thank you. Jim?
Question through the chair. Chief, does the police department get any type of grants from the state, federal, like Homeland Security or anything, for any type of equipment at any time?
We get about approximately $40,000 E911 support grant that you can use for either equipment for that, or you can use for overtime for dispatch personnel.
Now, do you have to submit the grants, or is that, that's
yes.
done through your department?
Yep.
Or is it, so it's not done through the town? I was just wondering because...
And we
grant money
recently
always-
received a new K-9 vehicle through grant funding as well. What type of vehicle was that? Is that?
That's as,
I know there's grant money out there, it's just it's time-consuming to put all the paperwork together and actually submit it for the grants, and I was just wondering how effective we are in trying to get those grants.
yeah, we couldn't compete for the recent K9 grant because we have one currently.
Yeah, and historically, we've been reimbursed for protective vests as well. So when there is grant money out there, the police department, through town
We do make
administration, is
application.
applying for it.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Good.
Free money's always welcome.
Pay for it somehow, but
Yeah,
we share
well, I
that
know,
cost. We share that cost, which
Yeah,
is
I know.
nice. Any other? Kim?
As someone who does police grants a lot,
Yeah.
there's not a lot of equipment money out there. There used to be a lot more money.
Yeah.
Governor's Highway Safety used to give money every single year
Yep.
for like radar, LiDAR equipment. That money has pretty much dried up. There's a little Homeland Security money out there. It's not all grant, and it's regional, so they're trying to make sure whatever they give has a regional effect rather than a community
Local.
effect. So police departments don't have the funding mechanisms on the grant side out there today that they had 2, 3, 4 years ago. Those monies have pretty much dried up.
Right up. Okay.
That's 100% correct. We used to get community policing money. I think we had 28,500 every year, and now it's zero.
And has been for about 5 years now.
Sure has.
Okay, now I remember those. Okay, if there aren't any other questions on the CIP, once again, Chief, we're not going to vote on the CIP. That would be a collective for the town on that, so we appreciate your time in answering questions on that. Let's just move on. We'll take care of your transfer and then get you out of here. Transfer we have before us from the police department. This would be a transfer from the Patrolman Quinn account. Present balance just over $106,000. Amount requested $2,650 to the clothing/uniform account. Reason for the transfer is shortage in account due to personnel changes.
That's because we just hired one person who was contractually owed that money as a new employee, and that also includes the new hire that we're going to be making to replace Sergeant Johnson.
Okay. So you figure
So I won't have to come back again.
his size uniform isn't going to just plain fit, whatever. I know him just well enough that I feel okay saying that. Just well enough. Any questions, comments, or better comments? All right.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Chief, thank you. Lieutenant, nice to see you, too.
Very much.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Okay, great. Next, we have the school department up. Superintendent Brunel is here, and our budget manager. Peter, good to see you. I will make a comment while getting set up. Peter, the setup of what we've been presented, fantastic to work with, understand, go back and forth on that, so excellent. I hope as things move forward with the, I'll call it the major shift around with the schools, that that's not going to cause you any additional agita in terms of getting that straightened out. So, thank you very much. Dr. Brunel, great to see you as always.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the Finance Committee, Mr. Kazanovich, Mrs. Kwiatkowski. On behalf of the school committee, thanks for allowing me to speak tonight along with Mr. Gray. I do want to echo the comments that have been made already and congratulate both Julie and Ed for leading the town-wide effort to really improve the bond rating. I think it's a great team effort and couldn't be done without their leadership. Genuine success does not come from proclaiming our values, but from consistently putting them into daily action. Those words were spoken by Ken Blanchard and are ones that we embrace as a school district, that not only are we looking and talking about making improvements, but I believe that we are consistently putting them into action. As we've done each year, we build our budget based on the core values that have been established. Responding to needs based on data is our overarching goal that we have, but we also are very committed to the following: to ensuring that we have safe and respectful environments for our students and staff, that our decision-making is student-centered, that our high expectations are ones that we have for all, although they may differ for individuals, that we're dedicated to continuous improvement, and that we believe all deserve equitable opportunities. But the backdrop against all of that is the question that we constantly ask: how will this impact students in their achievement? We set priorities, as we always do, that drive our decisions. Student safety is critically important. The Auburn Middle School project, we continue to be appreciative of your support, as well as town meeting and the Board of Selectmen and school committee support on that. I'm happy to report that there's an awful lot of ground that's being moved behind us. The fence is almost completely all in, and if you've not been by, I would encourage you to do so. We've committed to maintaining open lines of communication. We put out regular notifications. We have Facebook that also goes out in the Auburn account, as well as the district quarterly newsletter. In addition, we're doing renovations to the current middle school, the 10 Swanson Road property, and I thank the master plan team, led by Rick Ringard and the entire group of us. There are 19 that are working on that to make improvements to that facility for grades 3 to 5. Class size is always a priority for us. Student achievement is probably, always competes in terms of the first priority. Textbooks, and the continued implementation of the educator evaluation system. That's a new requirement from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. In addition, technology as a tool to enhance the rigor and relevance that we've committed to as a district. We started this year a grade 8 one-to-one pilot implementation for iPads. And based on the work of the one-to-one digital learning team, the recommendation was brought forward to expand that to include all of grade 8 and grade 9 next year, and we're very excited to bring that on board. And tremendous amount of planning and training has gone on already and will continue. We're committed to continuous improvement, our high-quality professional development program. We focus on our strategic plan, and I thank, again, the 125-plus members who came together in November to look at that plan and come up with new goals and priorities that will lead us for the next 5 years, and we're continuing to actually write that. And also increasing our advanced placement offerings at the high school, both in terms of participation and the qualifying scores. As we do each year, we have a very multi-layered approach that starts right at the building level. Leadership teams put together their respective budgets. Those come before Mr. Gray, myself, and the Director of Teaching, Learning, and Curriculum. Revisions, are made to those. We meet as a group regularly throughout the fall and actually start our budgeting process in November with presentations to the school committee. Each year, we need to make assumptions based on the time that we're creating the budget, and these are the ones that we included for this year. We're assuming that all federal grants will come in at the current appropriations. We've not yet received final guidance, but we're hopeful that would be the case. Medicaid reimbursement funding at the current level, which is $124,000. Circuit breaker reimbursement, which is for extraordinary special education costs for students above a particular threshold, and most notably for students who are in out-of-district placements, that being at 60%. School choice numbers being the same, the 41 over the middle school and high school. We do continue to implement a $100 per student fee based on particular criteria, up to a max of $250. And we look to utilize monies from our revolving accounts, the goal really being to minimize the operating budget's impact. The original budget that the school department that we put together and presented to school committee represented a 4.29% increase, a value of $23,278,408. As indicated to you, that was the first pass-through, and multiple discussions have occurred since then. We look at various scenarios, each with increasingly deeper cuts to them. But our goal of insulating our students and always asking that question, how will this impact students and their achievement, is always the top priority. And I am happy to say, and thank again the Finance Committee and all those involved, that full-day kindergarten, non-tuition based, does continue to be maintained. And we also look to use our grants very strategically. Everything that we do is really try to minimize the impact to the taxpayers in town whenever possible. What you'll see in the next slide is what I believe is in behalf of the school committee, a very fiscally responsible budget request that we are making. And although no new fees were implemented, we do use a $90,000 offset for the transportation line, and those are from fees that are collected currently. The FY15 budget before you is a $23,072,065 budget, which represents an increase of 3.37% over last year's appropriation of $22,320,000. These slides, the next three slides, actually highlight, I believe, that fiscal responsibility and commitment in working with the town that the school department has demonstrated. Since coming here, and this is now my 6th year as superintendent, this shows actually the dollar increase in the third column, and then the percentage increase, or in the first year, percentage decrease that was brought forward. Over a 6-year span, that shows an increase, on average, the mean of 1.92% increase. Additionally, the total dollar increase is $2,562,070. Another data point to share is the Chapter 70 increases, or again, in that first year, a decrease that have been realized over that same 6-year period. What you'll see here in total, that Chapter 70 increases have resulted in $2,582,014, or as you can see here, that any increase, but for $20,000, that's actually to the good, that the school department has requested, has been funded completely from Chapter 70 increases, including the request before you tonight. The new staffing requests, these are highlighted here for you. The first, to actually just expand the number of hours that individuals will work. What we did this year was to really try and connect these very explicitly to the core values that we have. So you'll see over here on the right that these actually line up with the core values. So for the elementary schools, to increase the instructional assistant or the ABA hours. So that way they match the student's day. What we have been doing over the past many years, and dating back at least until 2001, and my guess is likely before that, is that we would be juggling and trying to share responsibilities for students. These are students who have IEPs and have identified whether they're academic or perhaps sometimes emotional or behavioral concerns. So those really address the safety concerns and high expectations that we have for all. The next request is for 2 full-time equivalent ELL, English Language Learner tutors. We had an audit that was done, or a review, I should say, coordinated program review last year, and just got the results back just a couple of months ago. And we're not meeting the obligation of how many hours we're actually supporting these students. I'm happy to report our students continue to make progress, but we did need to submit to the state a interim summary update of improvements that we're going to make, so we will need to add 2 ELL tutors. We have approximately 75 students currently who have English not as their first language, and those span, at last count, about 14 different languages that they speak. At Mary D. Stone School, we're looking to add a special education IA. These are needs coming up from the preschool that have been identified, and also 2 inclusion IAs to support classrooms. This goes very much in line with our co-teaching and inclusion, and speaks to the high expectations and equitable opportunities. And then addressing a class size issue at grade 4 at Julia Bancroft is the addition of a teacher, and again, this speaks to our student-centered decision-making. Bryn Mawr, we will also require 2 additional instructional assistants, these likewise to support preschoolers who will be moving up to kindergarten, and also to add a special education teacher for co-teaching and inclusion. That's a great initiative that we have underway. In some schools, next year will be the 3rd year, and in others, the 2nd year, but it's realizing positive benefits for our students. Auburn Middle School, we're looking to expand the IA hours as well. That's not a position, just increase in hours. And then the Media iPad Integration Specialist. As we all know, the following school year, you will have a brand-new Auburn Middle School with about a 3,600 square foot media center, which will be wonderful to have in place. This individual will actually help with the iPad implementation that will be full-scale in 8th grade next year and a pilot in 7th. And then finally, at the Packagug and Mary D., it's an increase in hours to meet increasing needs and to provide equity across the districts. So in total, the first subtotal shows $342,098 in new positions, yet we reduced or eliminated a one-to-one nurse at one of our schools due to shifting student needs. So in total of the approximately $750,000 increase, $306,000 is in new staffing requests. But in keeping with this and referring back to the 3 slides offered previously, where we see that every increase, including the one that we're requesting, comes solely from Chapter 70, but it's also indicative of the appreciation that the school committee has and the collaborative commitment that we have made to working with the whole town. Strengthening connections through rigor, relevance, and relationships. That is a motto that we continue to live by as a district. Just some highlights in terms of rigor. We have a rigorous core curriculum that is in alignment with the Common Core state standards. We have both advanced placement and pre-AP trainings that are taking place, and we're looking to bring some of those pre-AP down to the upper elementary grades. We have keys to literacy training, effective questioning, writing across the curriculum, the co-teaching that I've mentioned, park readiness, iPad integration, and as mentioned previously, implementation of the Common Core state standards. In terms of relevance, job-embedded trainings. We just had a fantastic March menu day on March 14th, and actually the Leicester Public Schools joined us for that. And teachers, 500-plus staff members had the opportunity to pick areas of interest, all of which were in keeping with goals that we have as a district. The educator evaluation system, our strategic plan, which will soon, once created, drive our district and school improvement plans, and the summer work that continues so that we're ready for students when they return in the fall. In terms of relationships, the co-teaching and inclusion, as I said, is already showing great momentum and very positive results. This is about teachers working together and sharing both content knowledge and process knowledge to support all students. We're committed to professional learning communities, really strengthening the transitions for our students, but also for our families. We recognize that when children move from one school to the next, it may be nerve-wracking for students and also for parents as well. So we've really made a strong effort to be sure that we're communicating on all fronts. And then responding to needs based on data. Data is something that is discussed literally every day in our school, each of our schools, whether it's regarding attendance data, formative data about some tests that students took on a particular day, or summative data. It's constantly a question that we ask, and again, I come back to that question, how will this impact students and their achievement? To share with you the budget process going forward, a week from tonight, we will hold our public hearing in the high school auditorium. Letters have gone out to all town meeting members for that, and this is in compliance with the MGL Chapter 71, Section 38N, and Mr. Baker, our town moderator, will moderate that event, as he has these past at least 5 years. I think this could be his 6th. Moving forward, as indicated, we've sent the invitations to public hearing. It is open to the public, so I welcome anyone to come. Our budget is posted online for everyone to see. In the letter that's sent to the town meeting members, giving them my phone number and my email address, happy to answer questions at any time. We believe it should be and is an open book and transparent. The administrators' budgets are on the website, as are the PowerPoints that were created that talk about successes or accomplishments in 14, as well as moving forward in 15. And we have a question and answer section on the website. We check it regularly and then post those questions and answers. And really, the intention of doing all of this is to ensure the school committee's goal of being very transparent is one that's accomplished. So in closing, Tom Landry said that setting a goal is not the main thing. It is deciding how you will go about achieving it and staying with that plan. And we couldn't agree more, but it is not an effort that any one of us can undertake alone. And by one of us, I mean even in the school department, it is a joint effort, home, school, and community. We believe that our students deserve nothing less than the best. We're committed to continuous improvement, and I thank you for your support, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thanks, Doctor.
Thank you.
And hopefully we have a hall pass on next Wednesday. We have a conflict with our own meeting, so, as usual.
You do, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open up to questions. We'll go with the operating budget. And actually, I think the budget number that you've presented as your final is just a little bit off of the latest number we have, slightly off. And I know we've got another town number on that, so just so we're all clear on that.
Okay.
Just, I think it was $30,000 off for 20.
Yeah, I think 15 is a result of the action the school committee took at their last meeting. They reallocated what was previously approved.
Sure.
Or recommended.
Right.
That has not been built into your CIP plan yet, because I knew Dr. Brunel was going to present that tonight.
Right.
So we'd be happy to work that in. I didn't know whether you had any questions relative to that, so we can revise that. I can tell you for 15, no change. I think 16, there was a $115,000 reduction.
What we did is we actually shifted, our goal that we had shared with you on the 29th at the joint meeting was to complete the necessary repairs to the best of our ability without asking the taxpayers for any additional money to the 10 Swanson Road. So we did make a couple of shifts in, what we did is we originally thought that we would be able to install modular classrooms in 15 and take it out of 16, and we realized we needed to revert that back. So hopefully you have the most updated copies. It doesn't reflect a change to the bottom line at all. It just shifts where it would be spent from, in what year.
Okay, so when we get to the CIP, we'll jump into that a little bit more detail on what changed, even if it was within the year, if it's significant anyways, just so we have a highlight on it.
Sure.
So let's, for the moment anyways, focus on operational questions. Once again, so everyone's aware that our committee does not have the ability to go in and require changes to individual line items. It's certainly discussion probably to get to the same bottom line. I know the school committee's, I'll call it final number, I know that sounds a little harsh, is still higher than what town administration has come up with for a number for right now, so just so we're clear on that. So I'll open this up to questions. Kim?
I was just going to ask, what is your bottom line number that you're requesting? Is it 23,108, 148?
No, it's actually,
Just a little less than that, correct?
just don't want to misstate it. It's $23,072,065.
Dr. Brunel, can you repeat that again?
$23,072,065.
Just a little. Yep. So about 36,000 less than the latest number we had in front of us. which
Correct.
sure
It
is
should be
timing, so-
$36,083 less. That's the difference of the one-to-one nurse that was eliminated due to shifting student needs, and that happened
Bryn Mawr.
most recently at the last school committee meeting. I
Okay.
apologize, I thought
Nope.
information had been sent to you.
That's fine. That's what I was alluding to, that we knew was a little bit off. Okay. So just focusing on the operating budget right now. Questions from anybody? All right, Jim, go ahead.
Well, obviously, we have this situation frequently on a yearly basis where we have a difference of department request and recommendation of the town manager. With the recommended budget given by the town manager, how would that, do you have a plan for that amount, or how would that differ from what you have?
I believe the difference is approximately $91,000. So what we would have to do, what I would imagine would happen is that the school committee requests that we go back and review all of the line items and come back to them with a recommendation. I can tell you that I believe the request that we have brought forward on behalf of the school committee is a reasonable one, but we'd have to go back through the process as we've done each step of the way.
Because right now, we have a balanced budget, or somewhat balanced budget, and obviously, the state numbers, we don't know for sure. News has been good so far, but nobody knows what the final number's gonna be. Obviously, several departments have their, wish list of what they're looking at. And probably some of these things will not be decided until fall town meeting,
Right.
as they usually are. But, I mean, it's really a situation where, as usual, we have a balanced budget. We need to try and keep that balanced budget unless we can get money from a different source, or shuffle money around with what we have to work with.
Understood.
But I'm sure that this is going to be looked at again as the state numbers become a lot clearer, and hopefully we'll be able to fund several things on these wish lists, because, obviously they're all important. I'm not saying that any one is more important than another. Some of them have positions involved, other ones are increasing hours or something like that, but you know, certainly all of them are legitimate, and, you know, we'll see what the state comes up with.
I do think it's, and I appreciate that, and it is a challenging task to put together a balanced budget. I do think that, you know, the slide that shows the increase that the school department has requested over the 6 years is actually $20,000 less than any Chapter 70 increases. I think it speaks loudly to the school committee's commitment to working together.
Ed?
Through the chair, I think you answered it last year, so I apologize if I should know the answer, but, so on the budget where we have the comments for some of the positions to be negotiated, how do we contemplate that in terms of the budget?
So within this budget, we actually have a salary reserve line, and those are generally either for contracts that are under negotiations currently, which is our custodians, our instructional assistants, and our secretaries, as well as those individuals on an individual contract that is performance-based, but there is money built into here to address those.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I have one more
Sure,
question.
go ahead, Jim.
I just had one other question. The current teacher's contract
Yes,
is valid till when?
June of 15, so
June of
another
15.
year. So we will likely begin negotiations at some point during next school year to start in FY16.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. Is the town in the middle of a bus contract now, and what year of the contract are we in? And how is that, have any increases in gas prices affected those rates?
Mr. Gray, I'll have you.
Right, we do have surcharge built into the contract, and once again, it's based on market value right now, so we see them up and down. The current bus contract allows us to extend it one more year, which I think we intend to do under the current contract in anticipation of the new middle school, and all the bus routes will have to change anyway, so that's the only stand on the contract for buses.
Okay, so continuing that, I didn't think of that. I mean, do you think that there'll be an increase in cost because of the middle school changing, or, no?
I don't know that there'll be an increase in cost, but it will certainly require a shift in the bus routes. And we'll also be looking at the start times of our schools to be sure that there's ample time for buses to get safely from one place to the other. Obviously, the middle school and high school will no longer be in real close proximity, so the 15-minute differential that's currently exists may not be enough, but that's part of everything that we're looking at.
I had another question about the new instructional assistants at the elementary schools as a result of the students coming up from the preschool with those identified needs. Do you think that the town is realizing in a way a savings because the students perhaps are in district instead of having to go out district?
There's no question. Anytime we are able to keep students in district and support them so they can successfully progress, I don't know that I can think of a scenario where it wouldn't be a cost savings. So absolutely.
Okay, one more question. How about the school numbers? Have the student population, has that remained steady, or do you see it increasing or decreasing?
It's remained steady. This year, I think we saw about a 30-student drop in enrollment. We had a couple of classes that are graduating of larger sizes with smaller coming, but that should actually neutralize itself very soon.
So you
I
think it's
anticipate it will stay steady.
steady? All right, thank you.
Okay. Kim, any questions?
Dr. Brunel, I know you went through the list of staffing positions. How many of those, how many total educator positions are in that? I tried to write it down, but I think I...
Sure. In total, there are 3 teaching positions. There's a grade 4 teacher, a special education teacher, and the media iPath specialist. And then there are 7 support staff members, 2 English language tutors, and then 5 either IAs, special education IAs or ABAs.
Are those all full-time, so it's 10 full-time positions, or What's the full-time equivalent?
Full-time, they would all be considered full-time equivalents for an ELL tutor. That would be basically 30 hours a week or 6 hours a day for the 180-day school year.
So it's 10 basic full-time,
Correct. FTEs, yes.
and that's despite the fact that the population hasn't grown.
But these are, so the ELL tutors, the overall population hasn't grown, but our English language learner population has grown, so that is to address their needs. In terms of the IAs and ABAs, that's specifically to address students' identified special education needs through IEPs. The grade 4 teacher is, we actually had added a grade 3 teacher this year due to a bubble, so to speak, and to keep the class sizes 25 or below, and thought we would not need one next year, but we had so many students come into second grade this year, we're going to need that. So the third grade will go up to fourth, or we'll add one. The special ed teacher is really to address the co-teaching and inclusion, and then the iPad is also, the integration specialist is for that initiative and in preparation of the new middle school.
I'd just like to say, I echo what my fellow committee members, we are very appreciative of the cooperation that has existed between the schools and the town and the finance committee as long as you've been, that wasn't always the case. There were many years where there was a much more of an adversarial relationship between town government and school government, and it's very refreshing, and it remains refreshing. That said, we've looked at several departments' budgets and requests for additional personnel or programs that department heads have made very good pitches for why they need X, Y, or Z. And at this point, those positions are not recommended by town administration because they can't afford to do that, and B, the departments are not pushing to go to town meeting demanding those positions. I would love to give everybody what they want and need to run their departments, but I'm not sure that that's possible given the financial structure that we're in, unless we're going to raise revenue in some way, raise taxes more, and I'm not sure there's an appetite for that on the town administration side, on the school side, or on the taxpayer side. So I want you to know that we're appreciative, or I'm appreciative of your efforts, and if we were to, I'm not sure that I can support an additional $91,000 for you any more than without being able, if I can't support the fire chief's request for some assistance and a half of a position in the town hall. They're both valuable requests, and if the money isn't there for one, it's probably not there for the other.
Understood. I do, and I understand the challenges, and I do appreciate the support of the Finance Committee, and I know I speak on behalf of the School Committee when I say that. The increase in positions, the overall budget of the 3.37% required us to, in answering that question, how will this affect students and their achievement, when we knew that having additional ELL tutors was a requirement, there was no turning away from that. We had to make cuts elsewhere to try and bring in this reasonable budget. So I do appreciate the work done by all departments, and, I think the Chapter 70, that increase does actually reflect all of this, but I understand your position.
Thank you.
Eddie?
Through the chair. Is there any big changes in the school choice for the next coming year?
It's actually currently just as planned, just as what we have now, 26 at the high school and 15 at the middle school. And the school committee actually did vote to keep that the same. They do have the ability to go back and revisit that if they wanted to increase the numbers, but that was approved probably at a January meeting. We're accepting applications now through the end of March.
All set, Ed?
Yes, thank you.
And just follow up, I've got a couple of questions. Do we normally have more applicants than positions available for,
I would say at least double is fair to say.
that's what I had thought I heard myself. Actually, any more questions before? I've got a couple. Actually, one random thought here as I was looking through this. My first thought was, are we planning on all these substitute teachers going out on paternity and maternity leave, or is that just, a smart thing to do budget-wise? I saw that and I'm like,
I will tell you.
wow, well, it's an interesting job description. I mean,
We
you
have
know.
had, actually, Mr. Kazanovich asked the same question, so I don't have the ability to know if someone's going to be pregnant in a year, just for the record, but we have had a number of retirements over the past few years, and oftentimes when new, sometimes younger teachers come in, they may be of the age that they're starting families. So we have found over the past few years, there's been a substantial increase in the number of individuals out for maternity leave, and we thought best to address it in here so that we're not caught short.
From doing a lot of budgets, that's a very smart thing to do, and I actually apologize for it coming out as a question. It really should have just
Quite
been
all
a
right.
comment, so.
Yeah.
A couple, and these are really random. I know the school budget relies to a certain significant degree on grants from the state, from the feds, et cetera. Do we have like a total number of what we're relying on from both the state and federal government?
I can get that for you, but I would say that we're easily in the $800,000 range, I would say, perhaps even better. Our special education, the 240 grant, is somewhere in the vicinity of the high 400,000s, maybe 480. We have Title I, the Title IIA grant, and we have some much smaller grants that we receive. But I'm going to guess, I'll get that for you at the next meeting, but it's somewhere in that
A round number is
vicinity.
fine on that, and I'm only asking that question. A, I had no idea, and B, to the point that I continue to bring up with the CFO that, hey, look, at some point in time, we lose some state funding because of bad economies usually, et cetera, and at that point, it falls back on the taxpayers to backfill in if we're trying to keep programs in check.
Right.
And I had been meaning for years to find out in total what that number was, so somewhere in the 800,000 is really what I call less than that, or?
Mr. Gray is saying he thinks around 900 to 920.
Okay, so to me, I would call that a sort of at-risk number. I know all that won't go away at once if bad things happen.
Right.
But it's just good to realize what those numbers are in case we need to, because if we lose that kind of money, we're not going to function without significant changes in how we locally fund the school district.
Right.
Ed, did you want to add something
Yeah,
to
if I
that?
could, it's a good opportunity for me to just ask this question. And you may not have the numbers available, but with regards to outside funding, I know there's a level of circuit breaker you rely on an annual basis. We heard some recent news at a legislative breakfast that there's going to be an attempt to at least increase that by a proposal from the Senate. Mary Ellen, do you know offhand what level of funding you're currently getting in terms of circuit breaker on a percentage basis? Is it
60%.
all right? So 60% yields roughly, how many hundreds of thousands?
Well, it's based off of the reimbursement from the previous year of what you would have spent, so it's a fluctuating number, quite honestly.
So if the Senate were to get at 75%, that takes some pressure off the need for that difference of $91,000 that you are requesting?
It should.
Okay.
We've built this budget, that was one of our assumptions, is a 60%
Okay.
circuit breaker reimbursement. The challenge with it, and we're so appreciative of getting it, because it helps support what could be a $200,000 or $300,000 placement for a student with significant needs. So we pay that in a particular year, and then the reimbursement comes the following year. So, but yes, I would anticipate, and to my knowledge, they've never funded it at 75. That's what they should be funding it at. I think the highest they ever did was a 72%. No, 75 is the max that they had, I think that's what they had written that they would fund at. The highest they've ever gotten to is 72%.
I don't know if you heard the same thing, that there would be a push once again to at least try to bring that up, and I know, you know.
That's been an area that I have seen in the past, too, pretty widespread commitment to, or a big push from superintendents, because it is oftentimes the most volatile part of the budget that you really have quite literally little or no control over. So to have those funds is something that superintendents, and I sit on the superintendent task force, and that's one of our top priorities, is to have them fund that, because what we don't want to do, to Mrs. Holstrom's point, to a slightly different degree, is pit special education versus regular education. Every student needs everything that we can get, just like with departments we don't want to. So it's a strong effort, I know, on the superintendent's part as well as others.
So that's one area we'll at least keep an eye on to see if there's any growth that may help, you know, shrink that, that difference that the superintendent has identified tonight.
Go ahead, Kim.
I know you, Mary Ellen, you said it was 60% now. 60% of what kind of a dollar figure?
Our, do you have a rough estimate? So I would say we're probably, $1 million? No, yeah, it fluctuates each year.
600,000?
What we could get for you, probably what we would expect to receive in this year was about $600,000, somewhere in that vicinity. As a student ages out, who will leave us this year, will get reimbursement next year, but then in the fall, and we have some expensive tuitions that will, students will age out, so that's going to change, but it's about 600,000 we've get in, 5 or 6.
So potentially, if there was this push, you could have $150,000. If it went to 75%, you could have $150,000 additional revenue available that could offset the 90,000. I know it's not.
Sure.
I mean, we know these budgets aren't going to be final till September, October.
Right.
Anyways.
Yep.
Because we're not going to have final numbers for anything. We'll vote something, and then we'll go back and revisit it in September. And
Right, the frustrating part about that, especially for the schools, and it's unique to the schools, as you were talking, full-time equivalent positions, police, fire, teachers, is your school year starts in September.
Right.
So for planning purposes, it's something that, if we met late October, oh, great, well, let's add a couple of teachers, let's bring them in the week before Christmas, which, if I was a teacher, or that teacher, that'd be a pretty good thing, but from, an efficient way of running the town, that doesn't work very well, which is a little frustrating given the timeline. And that's another reason why this committee gets a little ripped off at Beacon Hill for not sticking to their plan of making sure we have a budget in a reasonable time frame.
Right.
Not that I'm looking at anyone out in the back of the town hall room here. Different issue altogether. Kim, any other questions?
no, thank you.
Jim?
One more.
Yep.
Just one more question. Mary Ellen, what is, and I don't know if you had it on one of the slides, what is the salary cost for the extra positions?
For the new positions?
Yeah.
I believe it's 305,000? 306,000,
Six.
$15.
The only reason I ask for that is when I see requests for positions, I always kind of the back of my mind, put in the benefit cost, and, because it's not always in the department, it's something that
Right.
is in the town
Right.
part of the budget.
I think this is a time for me to jump in once again. I think when we talked about employee benefits, when we calculated group health anyway, we made an assumption based upon at least a recommendation that we made at 2.96. There was recognition that there would be some new positions. I believe that the increase, I know the increase in employee health made an allowance for 7 new positions. And I think when we talked initially about the budget, I thought the equivalency was 7 point some odd and change. I may be wrong, I'd have to go back and take a look at that. But we recognize that at least the growth in the school department budget would require some additional dollars on the employee benefit side.
Go ahead, Kim.
What was that dollar amount, Ed?
On the employee benefit side, I think it was about $140,000, $150,000.
So on top of the 300, it's another 140 for
Right,
those positions.
right.
But
You gotta remember, there were other costs associated, and Mary Ellen presented the increase in school department budget over the last 5 years as well as Chapter 7, and it's basically a break even. Once again, there are other costs that the town has to absorb in support of the school department budget by way of fringe benefit costs, by way of Medicare costs. These are costs that go along with the positions that are embedded within the school department, so, yeah, that has to come into the mix as well.
Ed, did you say that you put in the contingency in the benefits?
No, it's actually built into our recommendation, into the recommended appropriation.
Okay. But not at the full.
We always make an allowance because as people retire as well, new positions are coming in, we have to cover both health insurance costs.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I asked the question is because I'm, when I'm looking at this wish list and looking at police and fire and all that,
Yeah.
that is just the salary.
Correct.
So you have to look at the other money that is going
Correct.
to be needed elsewhere.
And
In
depending
addition-
on level of wages, I mean, we typically use 30%
Yeah,
Right.
above and beyond
the salary.
salary.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes it's even more than that.
All depending on, right.
Yeah. Dr. Brunel,
Yes.
this presentation, we did not get this, I don't believe, which is, did I miss it, or is it, can we get it?
The PowerPoint presentation? Of
Yeah.
course.
Just some nice numbers, and
Sure.
over the years, you seem to touch on substantially most of the points we normally ask about, except for student population, but I don't get that, so gives us a chance to ask something. My last question, unless there's some others, also sort of random, you've budgeted in some building rental of the high school, and I don't know if that's the high school or the fields. Can you explain a little bit about what other uses or for us renting out either the facility or the playing field facilities?
The school committee has set a fee structure, and for inside of the building, at one time, we had Nichols College that rented
Right.
spaces, and that no longer occurs. The auditorium is used for at least a couple, sometimes 3 dance recitals that occur, typically in June. We don't really take in, I'm trying to think, I could get you this actual. Generally, the use of the field is oftentimes for lighting only, and that goes into a special account to pay for lights if someone, those are typically used only by Auburn groups, but if they require lights, there is a cost for that. So those are primarily the ones. We used to have at the high school much more with the Nichols College, and
Okay.
they don't use that any longer.
And with the addition of the press box, are you expecting expanded use of it? I know there were some groups, including like the local rugby team. I know some of the college football teams, D3 or whatever, had some interest.
The I think it's fair to say that the school committee really tries to balance the use of the fields, trying to really stretch their useful life and not have them be overused. They are used, if we go by there on any given day, and it was great to see their complete green one day last week. But to balance that, so to not overuse them. So we really don't rent those out a tremendous amount. I don't know that I've been approached about an increase in time. There has been a rugby group that has used it in the past, but that was pre-press box,
Okay,
I think.
excellent. Any other questions?
Actually, I can ask another question. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Could we have a breakdown of the other revenues, the offsets and the sources?
Sure.
So I see a lot of them in here, which is great. I was just, I wanted just so we could see what part is from a grant, what part is revolving, what part might not be what amounts might not be as secure as others.
Great. We can absolutely
Thank you.
provide that, no problem.
Jim?
Actually, it kind of goes with Ann's question about revolving accounts. Revolving accounts that deal with the school and whether it's renting out or, how is that done now? I know at fall town meeting, there's usually money that is transferred from a revolving account to the school for, like the cleanup and things like that. Isn't that something that's in the fall town meeting?
No, annually, there's a vote by town meeting. There are two provisions of MGL that allows the establishment of a revolving account. Anything under Chapter 53E or E and a half requires a vote of town meeting. There are other revolving accounts that are allowed to be established under Chapter 71. That's at the discretion of the school department and the school committee. So those Chapter 71 revolving accounts never get looked at by town meeting. They require an annual vote of town meeting, anything under 53 or 53. They're self-supporting. They can only be expended for the purpose that they're created for. For instance, athletic revolving account can only be used for to support athletic-type purposes, whether it's programs, supplies, or anything else. But no, there's never a transfer made by a vote of town meeting from the revolving account. It's not used as an available fund.
Okay. Because I know, and actually, we're going to be looking at solid waste, and I have a question on revolving accounts for that, too, so we'll wait for that.
Yeah, let's keep solid waste separate from the school here. I'm going to draw the line on that.
I just could never figure out the revolving accounts and how they're funded and how that money is expended afterwards.
And those accounts were audited like
Yes.
the school accounts, separate audit, but they're audited anyways
Yes.
annually. I know you've mentioned that before. Are there any other questions? I'll make the last one, and then we'll go to a vote here. Dr. Brunel, can you give me an update on how the funding is going for that special group of seniors, the We the People group that are trying to get down to DC?
Sure. They came to our meeting last week and reported that they had over $25,000 raised towards their goal of $47,000. But since then, they may have taken in more money. I will put a plug that on Saturday, March 29th, there is a spaghetti dinner at the high school. I believe it's from 5 to 7:30 or 8:30, and all are welcome to come. They have raffles, basket raffles that they've made up, and tickets can be purchased, but can also be purchased that night. So the community is certainly rallying around them, and we're happy and
Excellent.
appreciative.
Glad to hear that, and I think anyways that this program is going to be televised all across town, so
Great.
in terms of any kind of marketing efforts, glad to be
Great.
part of that.
Thank you. It's a
Okay,
phenomenal.
back to the budgets.
Phenomenal.
Question to Ed, so our town manager recommended number is the 22,980,000, correct?
Correct.
That is the correct number, and can I also assume the fiscal 14 appropriation number we're looking at, is that the original, or is that a revised appropriation number?
That's the present
That is the present, the 22,320.
There was no supplemental appropriation.
That's what I-
Correct.
There was an amendment from Medicaid.
Outside article on that. I just want to make sure I'm presenting
The
correctly.
iPads, but that's an outside article, not part of
Correct.
the 22 million.
Okay, so we'll take a vote on the operating budget, and then we'll get into discussion on the CIP. So before us, we have a recommended budget by the town manager, which is not quite the same. It is somewhat less than the school committee and school department recommendation, but the town manager request is for $22,980,672 for the fiscal 15 budget. This compares to the fiscal 14 appropriation of $22,320,000 even. Is there a recommendation?
So moved?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you, everybody. That's great. Okay, let's move on to the CIP. We received in the last 24, 36 hours from Dr. Brunel and staff revisions, really movements around within the CIP, and I think some of it was to address all that's going on with the school buildings. So I appreciate the update. I know that has been hard to do and do quickly, even though we're in the middle of the process a little bit here. Can you just give a couple of quick highlights on what's X'd out, what's added, and I think underline that, at least for 15, there's no changes to the total school CIP, is that correct?
Correct. There's no change to the total CIP. Basically, what you saw in the original document sent was to install 2 modular classrooms in 15 at Bryn Mawr School, and we've reverted that back to 16 where it originally was placed. So that's the difference there that you see in any funds possible. What we've done is to put them into the 10 Swanson Road repairs and updates, which does get us, I know that we had shared with you on January 29th, a number that was approximately 1.6. With these shifts, we should have ample money to do what we believe right now, based on cost estimates, to accomplish all of that work that's required.
Okay. Now, when this is all done, assuming whatever approvals and that kind of thing, and I don't want to talk about process in terms of that tonight, will there still be modulars at 10 Swanson Road?
Those are planned to stay, yes.
Okay. No additions to that, but they will stay there. I know they've been there for quite some time.
They have, through Mr. Fahey's efforts and his team, they remain in good shape. They make some repairs to them. But even when the master plan team looked at that building, recognizing that at some point those would no longer continue to be functioning, there is ample space for us to be there, but for now, we do intend to use them.
Okay, good. Is that building heated by, is that a combination of gas and oil in the building?
Gas does
or-
not go by there, unfortunately.
Gas does not go by there.
And there's no plan to have it go by, unfortunately.
Okay, so it's oil heat.
It is.
It is oil heat, okay. Are there any other questions or comments on the CIP? Once again, Dr. Brunel, we're not going to take a vote on the CIP. We'll do that in total, and I know you only recently gave us those revisions, so there very likely could be some questions that come back to you. We'll try to manage that as best as possible to
I'd be
not
happy to
duplicate
return.
questions,
And I
okay?
will bring Mr. Fahey with me when I come, if you want us to, so just let us know.
Fine. Kim?
I have one question.
Yep.
Mary Ellen, on your capital, particularly with the building rehab number, the 925,000, this is all borrowed, Ed, right?
That is correct.
So if the town goes out to borrow this money in the summer or fall, is that how it
It
normally?
would be September of 14.
Okay. When do you expect to expend these funds?
We actually have a schedule that we have created. The bulk of them is for the 10 Swanson Road project, so we've actually planned out all of the projects that will happen there, starting this spring, and then in through August of 2015. So I would say that the bulk of it will be spent within a year of being borrowed.
Okay, because one of the things that I'm looking at is the 2010, 2012, 2013, those fiscal year amounts that were borrowed, 3 to 1 year ago that are sitting there. We're paying principal and interest costs on those funds. And I don't want to continue to be borrowing money that isn't going to be expended within the fiscal year that it's borrowed, because it just doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
So just looking at, and 14's already been borrowed, but just looking at 10 and fiscal 11, 12, and 13, there's $1.2 million that's kind of sitting there. We're paying it on it, and it's not expended. And we're going to do another million. I just want to be certain that that sometime in fiscal 15, these funds are going to be expended.
What I can, I appreciate that, Mrs. Holston. What I can say to you is, because of the school committee's strategic use of these funds, or the reserving of these funds, is the primary reason that we will not need to go back to the taxpayers for the pretty substantial upgrade that will happen to the 10 Swanson Road property. So we had actually purposely delayed some of those projects, waiting until a decision was made. Would the townspeople support a new middle school? And they generously, overwhelmingly did. And then, if that were to happen, how will we best make use of the remaining schools, the 10 Swanson Road and the 4 elementary? So with those decisions now in hand, we're prepared and plans are underway to really get these projects moving.
No, I understand that and appreciate that, but, in fiscal 2011, the town borrowed $300,000 for school building rehab that someone in the school department indicated that would be expended, because the authorization to borrow it, just because you have the authorization doesn't mean you actually have to go out and borrow the cash until you need it. The authorization doesn't go away, so, I mean, I have authorizations for several $100,000 in my budget, my capital rehab budgets in the city, that I tell the city what I'm going to actually be able to handle for a project in a given fiscal year, and how much cash I'm going to need. And they only borrow the amount that and if I need more than that, and I didn't tell them, oh, well, tough for me, I have to put it off till next year.
Right.
But, I mean, borrowing money in advance of projects and leaving it there for multiple years, it's just not fiscally prudent. It's not. And, based on, I asked the CFO before the meeting, what is the borrowing cost? Well, for these 3 fiscal years, it's $1.2 million of funding that's sitting there. And that's roughly $125,000 in principal and interest that the town's paying and getting really no benefit from. So I want to make sure that we are actually going to expend, and this doesn't go just for schools. It's for any departments.
Sure.
We shouldn't be, if we don't need it, that's great, and I think it's awesome that you didn't spend money that you didn't really need based on the changes to the buildings. And
Right.
that's understandable.
Yeah.
But we need to be cognizant of real construction plans.
I agree, and I would say that, the past couple of years, we've really worked closely, I think, with Mr. Kazanovich, when asked to identify exactly what it is that we would need in the short term, and then what could be delayed. So we're committed to doing that.
If I may, this is an exercise we go through every time we go out and borrow. We actually reach out to the department and say, okay, identify your need. Because we don't want to borrow money that they're not going to
I know.
expend. And certainly, there are arbitrage issues that we're concerned with, because if we hang on to the money and we don't spend it, now we could be paying penalties and interest on money that we're earning interest on, that we have no right earning interest on. And for instance, some of the library capital we actually put off until we knew that it was real, that it was going to be, the construction was going to happen, and that they were going to expend. So in most cases, we may borrow 100% of what has been approved. And there are other cases that we hold off on some items. So
No, that's what I expect.
Yeah.
That's what we do as well. But it looks like, and that's why I asked you earlier, where these funds sat.
Yeah. And I think in most cases, whether it be schools or any other department, the need that they identify is real. I think in this case, there was some uncertainty about the status of the middle school. And so without approval, there were full intentions of moving forward with those capital improvements. Unfortunately, things got delayed, and so I think that's why you're seeing some amendments being made to reallocate those funds. And I totally understand the point that you're making, because we would make the same argument as well. We don't want to spend any more money than we have to in terms of interest costs for money that we're borrowing, so.
Okay. Any other questions? Dr. Brunel, you had alluded, and maybe I misunderstood, that some renovations on some of the elementary schools have already begun. I know there's always things going on. Did I just misunderstand you, that will be as part of this bigger project, or there's some things being undertaken?
Yes, as part of this bigger project for 10 Swanson Road, we also have planned some improvements to Bryn Mawr School and Packagug School.
Right.
Those will be the two elementary schools that will remain online to service our elementary students with grades 3 to 5 going to 10 Swanson Road.
And those renovations haven't started yet, correct?
I would say they're ongoing. Some of them are of a
Okay.
much smaller nature, more typical of what we would do in a given year, whether we're upgrading bathrooms, which is something that's going to be happening at Packagug. We're also looking at the HVAC system there, as well as at Bryn Mawr School. So those are not anywhere near the magnitude of the 10 Swanson Road.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions on the school CIP? And I know, Dr. Brunel, you've been very generous with allowing us to reach out to you individually if there are any questions. If I could suggest, though, if you do have some specific questions, if you could at least copy the other Finance Committee members, so we're not asking the same thing 2, 3, 4 times. I doubt that's going to happen, but
And we're happy to
save you a
return if
couple
you have
emails, so.
additional questions, too.
Okay, definitely do appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and good luck
Thanks,
next week with
everybody.
your meeting. Once again, sorry, we're going to miss it.
Thank you.
Okay,
Ed, do you want me to shut this off? Okay, good.
so our
Mr.
next,
Chairman, so just to let you
Good.
know about my
Yes.
intentions, we will amend the CIP to reflect the vote and the changes that have been presented to the Finance Committee tonight and incorporate that into the CIP plan.
excellent, thank you. All right, we're going to look at 2 more budgets, general services and solid waste. We will hold on debt and interest, and we've got 1 more transfer, and then we'll call it an evening. So if we could go to the general services budget. And if there are any questions, Ed, I would guess you'd be able to address them.
Sure. Through the chair, as we do every year, we take a a look at all the line items under general services to see how they're running year-to-date actual, and then based upon historical data on expenditures that, on a percentage level, from the point that we're taking a snapshot, we're projecting out to the end of the fiscal year. Based upon that, our recommendation reflects that actual exercise that we go through. With some minor assumptions, I mean, certainly gas, oil, and diesel is a volatile item. I can tell you that if we maintain the level of consumption and costs that we're recognizing now, that would be probably one item we would have to come back and amend at a fall town meeting.
No surprises.
Insurance is another one that we're trying to contain, to control. I can tell you our workers' comp, we had one high year that was really driving that number. We're hoping that will fall off and kind of neutralize any increase that we may realize. So that's why we're basically level funding that, because we've been told our mod for workers' comp, there's an expectation that it's going to go down. The mod is really a rating over a 3-year period. That one high year is at that year 3, that is going to drop off. So we're hoping, keeping our fingers crossed. We won't know until May, and May, June, what those rates are going to be. So
Okay.
that may be one other area that we may have to make a correction at a later town meeting.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, we have a town manager recommended budget for general services of $1,316,560. That's an increase of $10,628 over the fiscal 14 appropriation. Do I have a recommendation?
Motion to recommend?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Thanks, Ed. Our last budget we're going to look at tonight is solid waste. Jim got a little premature on that, but we'll get caught up to Jim on this. Solid waste is really 2.5 line items: the solid waste collection, the disposal, and other pickup. The amount requested is $953,445, a $13,132 increase over fiscal 14. Ed, can you give us some insight into
Sure.
the
The
contracts?
collection is the final year of a 5-year contract, so that is an actual contractual amount, so we know that that's not going to change. In terms of solid waste disposal, we believe $355,000 will be adequate, given the efforts of the Solid Waste Committee to promote recycling. So provided that there's no increase in the number of customers we're servicing, 355 should get us through the fiscal year.
Okay.
That's something that we continue to monitor. I know the Solid Waste Committee looks at that. I know I've had discussions with Amy Sullivan and Virginia Schnee about that. So we monitor that. We monitor that on a monthly basis. So right now, we would fall within that amount. But for whatever reason, if that should spike, if there's a reason why recycling numbers are changing, we would have to revisit that number. But right now, it should be a good number.
What would be the time frame on negotiating a next contract?
I think once we start the fiscal year, then we
The normal time frame?
start looking at that.
Okay.
Now, under MGL, it's an exempt activity under 30B. We do not have to bid it. That's something I think we want to have discussions with the Solid Waste Committee over, to determine whether or not we want to at least have discussions without going through an RFP, or whether or not an RFP is going to give us the best.
Some leverage? Yeah, okay. Questions, comments? Jim?
My question on, it actually goes to the overflow trash bags, that account, how is that handled? That is not a revolving account?
It's a special revenue account. quite honestly, only because we pay for the cost of the bags and we punish them, although that account is building up. There is a cost in picking up those bags. So annually, we vote a sum of money out of that account, and I can give you the value of that for the FY15 budget. It helps offset the cost of collection and disposal, because we're paying for tonnage for that when it goes to the wheel. So for fiscal year 15, we are relying on $20,000 of that revenue that we take in to offset the collection and disposal.
A question, and actually this came up at one of our last meetings, was we buy the bags, have them manufactured, they're distributed by the manufacturer to the supermarkets? How does that work?
Yeah, it doesn't come here, it goes directly, it's Waste Zero, to the individual vendors who sell the bags. In this case, it would be Shaw's, maybe Price Chopper, or whatever.
And that money that they
Collect.
goes back to us, or is it
No,
going
I
back
think
to the...
I think it goes back to Waste Zero, and then they electronically transfer
Okay.
money into an
That
account.
was one of the questions that
Yeah.
came up at our meetings, what that mechanism was, and who initiates, okay, we need more bags. Yeah, I definitely, on the question of the contract, that's another thing that we kind of talked to, and I'm sure we're gonna be, talking more about that, or whether to start renegotiate with our current vendor, or advantages, disadvantages of going out, because once we are through, we have a period of time where we can negotiate with the current vendor.
I'd have to look at the language in the contract to see if there's a trigger mechanism that at some point in time, if there's any intent for the town to renew the contract, they have to do it within so many days, but I would
They're a
suggest
sole, it's a sole negotiation with them. After that point, it has to be like an RFP, and then everything's over.
Yeah, I mean, if, let's say there's no interest for the town to renew with its current provider, and it's looking elsewhere, there just may be a notification provision within the contract that the town has no intent. Doesn't have to go out to bid, we could go directly to another vendor.
Okay. Okay, that was, I know that's something that's gonna be coming up during the fiscal year.
My recommendation would be to do it sooner than later, because,
I have to agree with you with
I
that.
mean, you've been through it before, these things do take time.
And it is town administration's intent to rely on, or at least consult with the solid waste committee
Yes.
on that. Okay, just so we're clear on that.
Yeah.
We don't negotiate it in the finance committee meeting.
Yeah.
Any other questions? We've got a budget request from the town manager for solid waste of $953,445. Do I have a recommendation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Okay, that's it for budgets tonight. There's one transfer. This is from the DPW Sewer Division. This is a request from the contingency fund. This is going to the Upper Blackstone. The amount requested is $95.61, and that is to cover a shortage due to additional Auburn connection to Worcester system. I had said to the CFO, we didn't need Jeff Mitchell coming up to explain this transfer. There's as much a rounding error, Ed, as anything. It was just kind of tightening up a calculation.
I haven't seen the transfer, I knew it was coming in, and I asked Jeff to prepare an explanation. I talked to him briefly, and I asked why there was a variance from the original assessment received from, Blackstone, and I guess there are some other minor agreements that play into, I think there's an agreement with Oxford, an agreement with Worcester that tweaks that number somewhat. So that's why there's a minor adjustment.
Okay. Any questions?
Motion. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. That's it for our agenda for this evening. We'll be meeting next week, and Sharon has us lined up with the Youth Commission, the Department of Development and Inspectional Services, and the library coming in. Any issues, people going to have trouble making it, or any other budgets you want to add to this? Okay, we'll work with this.
Chairman,
Yeah.
what's your, would you like Bay Path to come in?
I'll open that up to the board on whether, their numbers are final now, correct? As final as they're going to be. So I'll leave that to the board's discretion if we want them in. We haven't had them in a couple of years maybe now.
Maybe they can give us an update on their
I mean, I like to give them
Estimations.
advance notice as best we can if
Yeah.
there is a
And
desire to bring them in.
And this could be either on the budget or on their construction that's going on. I haven't heard boo regarding the Charlton issue with Southbridge on the water, which I know was going to have a big effect on that. So if we could get them in, Sharon, we don't have to have them in next week. Maybe it's just
week after that, or?
that would be fine. And you could mention to John that it may be just as much about their project as much as their budget, seeing how that's kind of set in stone.
You can tell them we won't get into the formula or explanation or anything like that.
Yeah. We'll be speaking out of school on that now. Okay, that's great. There being nothing else at this time, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye, opposed, so voted. Thank you.